What's going on, everyone? Anon here, and happy release day for Prismatic Evolutions. Hopefully, everybody here is not incinerating their cash like I have. The pull rates are brutal, and for $120, $150 ETB, if you get 10 cents on the dollar back, you're doing well. So the gambler's premium is absolutely batshit crazy, but take some time and distract everybody and cover a topic that a lot of people in Discord have been asking for. And it is the Pokemon Center ETBs and what is the actual um, estimated print run on these items. And this is also a way where I think we can kind of go through the thought process of Pokemon Company as it's moved over time. So if you recall, Scarlet Violet base came out March of 2023, and obviously Journey Together is scheduled for March of 2025. So we effectively have a two-year period here, if you will. So one thing I will note with the stock checker application, and there's a bunch of different places to do it, but it's effectively a data scraper that pulls back-end data from the Pokemon Center website, and it tells you basically the code behind the setup. So I'm not a coder, no idea how it works, but there's been a bunch of people who've asked, so that's basically it. And there's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing shady about it. It's a data scrape, and the data's out there. It's kind of free and clear. So one thing I do want to mention is the way that Pokemon Center's inventory is set up before we get started is the print runs in English. If you look on the actual package, it says CA UK, and it's printed in the USA. So that means it's printed in the US, but it's also available for sale in Canada and the United Kingdom. So Canada and the US ship out of the same location across borders for the Canadian Pokemon Center site and the US Pokemon Center site. UK is separate, it's standalone. And what's interesting is if you're in the EU and not in the UK, you can't buy from that, which surprised me a little bit. But I talked to a few people in the EU, and there's a little bit of frustration, and I get it. I mean, ever since Brexit, the currency translation thing's a little bit of a mess, but it is what it is. So what I did was I went through the tracker, and I pulled a screen grab of every single Pokemon Center ETB. And let me just walk you through Prismatic Evolution. So here you have the name, you have the SKU, release date, out of stock, OOS, item. This is all the internal stuff for Pokemon Center. The pre-order inventory limit is what I want people to focus on, because now, while we don't know what the print run of the items are, it looks like the inventory limit for pre-order, and these are posted before they come out. So you buy now and its estimated ship date at some point in the future is effectively the maximum that they could potentially load in the system. Now, we don't know if they're loading this, if they're not loading this, but logically one would assume that this number, they didn't just pull out of their ass, right? It came from somewhere. So I want to start current and work backwards. And I went back and forth on how I want to address this, but let's start currently. So Journey Together, and it looks like they're printing more of specialty sets than there are of standard booster box sets. And obviously there's a reason for that, right? You can't get the packs as easily in the specialty sets, etc. So Journey Together is interesting because they only printed 120,000 of these, and we can see Journey Together is right here, and it doesn't have the logo on. And here's 120,000. Now I don't know if they plan on dropping another 120. I can't imagine they sold 120,000 the day it came out, because it limited you to 2, and it was sold out in like 5 seconds, probably 5 minutes. But so I tend to think 120,000 is reasonable. And if you look at the estimates from, let's just shift to Magic the Gathering for a second. When they went to collector boxes with serialized cards, the math based on the disclosed odds, and in certain countries you have to disclose those odds because it's effectively viewed as gambling. So it's a statutory requirement. Really put the collector box print run somewhere in the 225 to 250,000 range. And that's worldwide. So if you think about just in the US and Canada, 120,000 boxes of these, it's a good quantity, but it's not crazy high. Because I would argue that, the sales of Pokemon or the popularity of Pokemon is probably a little bit above Magic. So, it's when it comes to collectability, the collectability of these, I think, is super, super interesting when everything else, obviously the print run's not unlimited, but it's only limited to the period of time that the set is out and how many other products are competing for print space. So moving to Prismatic Evolution, and this is kind of the disaster du jour today, 165,000. Now, I would probably believe that 165,000 would have sold on release day. I missed it because I didn't expect it to go this quickly. And then obviously today it didn't drop, and they had a little caveat on the website that I talked about earlier that said there's none available now, but they're going to print them in the future. So, this is really just the Pokemon Company kind of changing with the tone of the overall market. So going to Surging Sparks, 145,000. And this is interesting because it's a sizable jump up from Stellar Crown. So I think when Surging Sparks came out, they made a concerted effort to say, and I'm sure they did their market research, that it's a Pikachu set. It's going to be in high demand. You have Pikachu in the box. It's going to sell more than others. And you can see from Stellar Crown, which is a 100,000 print run, they printed 45% more. But then for Journey Together, they actually took it back a notch, which was super interesting. So when they were planning this, they're probably assuming that the buzz is going to stay elevated from Stellar Crown, but it's not going to be at the level of a Pikachu set for Surging Sparks. So it's fascinating just getting behind the logic and kind of guessing, if you will, what the Pokemon Company was thinking. So Stellar Crown's 100. Shroud of Fable is at 110, and this is what I was saying. Let's look at the specialty sets. Prismatic 165, obviously Eevee. My 4-year-old came home from daycare, and he's like, "Oh, that's Eevee, that's Eevee, that's Eevee." And I'm like, "How do you know who Eevee is?" He's like, "Oh, no, we see him in daycare," which is just, the branding's amazing. But you go back to Paldean Fates, 135. 151 was only 70,000, but we'll talk about this when we go backwards, because I think it's a little bit of an anomaly early on where they weren't quite sure what to make heads or tails of Pokemon Center ETBs. But, Shroud of Fable, a little bit less than Paldean Fates, a little bit more than Twilight Masquerade. Quite honestly, 110,000 is probably the right number. It's just the introduction of the set was at a terrible time because Twilight was just starting to kick up. And then Stellar Crown came out and was a relatively hot set because it has the Bulbasaur and Squirtle SIR. And then Surging Sparks, spoilers, started pretty much right away. And everybody's like, "I want the Pikachu. I want the Latios. I don't give a shit about Shroud of Fable." And, there's really no big hit in there. So, even though I think this print run's reasonable, it was disregarded just based on the general circumstances. Twilight, 85,000. This is actually a step down. And let's start here because from Stellar Crown on, it's one concept, but from base set to Twilight Masquerade is a little bit of a different one. So let's start with base at the beginning. And again, this is March 2023. So this is basically when the peak was starting to cool down. And there's 95,000. So 47.5 of the Cridon, 47.5 of the Miraidon. So they probably said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to print 95,000. Let's see what happens." So this obviously flopped at the time. So they went to Paldea Evolved. And this is the big outlier. So Paldea Evolved came out. They only printed 49,500. And, I don't know if this number is artificially low. And if you don't believe me, we can look here at Paldea Evolved inventory, 49,500. So I don't know if this number is artificially low because the interest was terrible or what. But I'm guessing it was just because the interest was terrible. Then you go to Obsidian Flames, Charizard set. They're like, "You know what? People love Charizard. We're going to print more." So they printed 70,000, and the set was kind of dead. Now these two sets are absolutely astronomical because there isn't a whole lot of volume. Now moving to 151, they're still in the dead zone. They know from SV base, there's nothing there. They're still recovering from COVID. There's a shitload of Sword and Shield stock sitting out there, just not moving. They probably said, "Yeah, it's a specialty set, but we're just going to keep the print run the same." So I think it was as simple as, we're going to keep it the same. Yes, it's specialty, but we have no idea what's going to happen. This was, September of 2023, where the world was pretty much starting to get back to normal. But this is really the tail end of the bear market, all the TCGs. So moving to Paradox, this is kind of the bottom where they started cutting back the print runs. They started tightening the hit rates. But you can see here, between the two, they're at 84,700. So they're up a little bit from 151 in Obsidian, but they have it split across two different sets. So you have the Roaring Moon, I don't know why I have Roaring, and the Iron Thorn. So this guy here, and I guess I have him hidden down here somewhere. Anyway, whatever. So then we have Paldean Fates come out, and it's at 135. So they basically said, look, this is going to be a banger set. People are going to love it. You have the Bubble Mew, whatever. So they print this one through the roof. But then Temporal, they take a step back again. They go back to 110. So it's almost like they start to treat specialty sets as being unique, almost like a longer life, if you will, and higher demand because it's more difficult to get packs. And then you look at Temporal, you have Walking Wake Iron Leaves, 55,000 each. And these are kind of really slow moving. And these two, the two Temporals and the two Paradox, quite honestly, are my favorite because there's a lot of them available. And the quantity of each is actually really, really light. So then, look at it this way. So Obsidian is 70. The two Paradox are 84. We call it 84.5. Temporal goes up to 110, but then with Twilight, they take a step back to 85. So they significantly cut the print run from Temporal to Twilight because the market was completely dead. And then, you look at Stellar, they're like, okay, well, let's take it up another 15. And this print run would have been before Greninja took off. They're probably like, you know what, Terapagos is popular in the new movie, the game. We're probably going to bump it up a little bit. So, there's a little bit of predictive nature to this, which is super interesting. But you can also see the ebbs and flows over 2 years of bull market and bear market. And really, they start high and then they throttle it way down. Then they have to move it up. And, it's super fascinating because in the middle of a raging bull market, they went from 165 Prismatic. They actually throttled the journey together back to 160 or 120,000. So, these guys aren't stupid. They don't do anything by happenstance. But I wanted to walk everybody through this because a lot of people have been asking about it. I know there have been a couple other channels that have done a really nice job of laying this information out. But I wanted to do it a little bit more currently and quite honestly, take everybody's mind off of the disaster that's Prismatic Evolutions. So anyway, guys, enjoy your Friday night. Subscribe to the channel, like, and join the Discord. We'll talk soon.